Hey, I'm here time traveling from the distant month of January because I need to tell you about everything I read, watched, and listened to in that month so long ago. I really started January off with a bang in more ways than one because a possum took up residence in that wall right there, the wall that my head lays against when I sleep. The thumps and bumps in the night have really infiltrated my dreams. That, combined with all of the vampire fiction I've been reading, has made for some interesting Hi, I'm just calling about a Centrelink claim I made. Sorry about that, didn't mean to get too real on this channel. What else happened in January? I performed a very impassioned rendition of 4th of July by Sufjan Stevens at a work function. My D&D character came into possession of a gorgeous vintage belt that I found whilst looting some orcs, which we had slain. Sorry, orcs. And I did start the year with a bang, because the first book I read of 2025 may end up being my favourite book I read all year. It's going to be in my top 5 at least, I'm calling it now, and I'm going to tell you about it, along with everything else I read, watched, and listened to in the month of January, because, oh yeah, this is my January wrap-up. The space between me and me is you. That is a quote from It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over by Anne de Marken, which won the novel prize and may be my favourite book I read this year. It is set during a zombie apocalypse, all told from the perspective of a woman who has been turned. She loses limbs and names but knows she is in love. Apocalypse as loss, as grief, as longing, space is carved behind ribs to fit a crow. A grandmother must satiate her grandson's hunger. Undead bodies become a ticking clock. Is becoming undead not also a sort of birth, an intimate bodily making, a passing of DNA? Is zombiehood procreation or uncreation? What then is motherhood? Women's bodies and desires are central to this fragmented novella, as is queer love, and it was incredible, it was original, it was poetic, it absolutely blew me away. It may end up being my favourite book I read this year. I don't even have it with me because I have passed it along to friends who all seem to have gotten something different out of it. And I want to keep it short and sweet because I think it is best gone into blind. But just know that at one point a zombie wears a Juicy Couture tracksuit. It was awesome. But in all honesty, the feeling of this book is why I read. 5-star. Full stop, period. And I read my BEE of the month, The Rules of Attraction by Bret Easton Ellis. Sorry, I keep calling it The Laws of Attraction, which I'm pretty sure is a manifestation self-help book. Anyway, in this novel, you spend a semester in the 1980s at a remote liberal arts college in New Hampshire where rules are basically non-existent. There are the drama majors that are vaguely gay, the unhinged fine arts students, the pretentious writers and poets. Everyone's on drugs, depressed, and yearning for connection, for escape, for release, for more drugs. But this is a place where majors change as fast as relationships and identity is fluid or perhaps non-existent. Boundaries are not worth considering. Alternating perspectives establish these characters as having no real character. Of course, they make decisions, often the worst ones, but how can we trust them when events are then recounted to us by another in an entirely different way? This novel has cemented my obsession with the BEELU, the Bret Easton Ellis literary universe, of course, which in many ways reminds me of J.D. Salinger's world of the Glass family, both in the weaving of characters throughout and in that metafiction element of the author's presence among his own characters. This kind of writing just really tickles my fancy. There are cameos galore, Clay post Less Than Zero and Not Coping Well, Patrick Bateman, American Psycho himself's compulsive liar of a younger brother Sean is there, as is, I'm pretty sure, and I was so happy to see her, my queen, Judy freaking Poovey. As a Donna Tart stan, a tartine if you will, I can't not talk about the numerous mentions of a weird group of classic students existing on the fringes of these parties and these groups that are, I'm going to directly quote this, probably roaming the countryside, sacrificing farmers and performing pagan rituals. This was published 5 years before The Secret History, but obviously Bret Easton Ellis and Donna Tartt were part of the literary brat pack in Bennington College and were close, and it is so fun going forward to read both of their works as part of the same universe. What I wouldn't give to go back in time and spend a weekend at Bennington College amongst the literary brat pack, but only if I could bring pepper spray and a taser and maybe a gun. I'd heard so much about how dark and twisted he is, and yeah, be warned, this opens with a graphic sexual assault scene. But why would I want to read about the disillusionment, the cruelty of the absolute elite in a way that shies away from the horror, the extremity? He commits fully, and what people don't talk about as much is how fucking funny he can be. I was laughing out loud at parts of this, and I truly think some of the reactions to his work just cement his skills at satire, because sure, this feels blown up or dramatized or unrealistic, but in no way inauthentic. Like a lot of his writing, this was detached and hollow, but is the absence of something nothing, or something else entirely. Like The Rules of Attraction, There There by Tommy Orange follows multiple perspectives that all interconnect and interweave. Amongst them is a teenage boy with fetal alcohol syndrome who finds solace in MF Doom, a woman who grapples with the repercussions of the occupation of Alcatraz, and three brothers who plan to attend their first powwow without their grandmother finding out. This novel is leading up to the big Oakland powwow, where all of these characters, the events in their lives will come to a head, as will a plan to rob the event with devastating consequences. The title is derived from a Gertrude Stein quote on Oakland, "There is no there there," and is often interpreted, or some would say misinterpreted, as an insult. And it really takes on a remarkable new form when employed by Orange. He is of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. The lands these characters' ancestors worked on, lived and loved and died on, sung and danced on exist, but not as they were, not as they are. How then does the land live on? I myself live on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation, and this made me deeply consider my own colonial notions of ownership and the spirituality of place. How then to move forward without forgetting to avoid stagnancy but honor tradition, to embrace change whilst fighting to remain? Obviously there is no easy answer, and Native American peoples, Indigenous peoples are no monolith, which is actually where the intergenerational and intertribal aspect of these various perspectives really was so valuable. Clearly I got a lot from this. The ideas explored are compelling and the voice feels fresh, but unfortunately it got to a point where the form started to let the content down. There were simply too many perspectives squeezed into this, and I couldn't figure out why each perspective was placed where it was. It just didn't feel deliberate, or rather I couldn't get a grasp of pace or pattern in where the focus lay, and it led to this really frantic quality that kind of broke all tension, and I just was disoriented. And then when I would orient myself, would move to a new person. Further affecting the pace were these breaks into mini essays on history and culture, which was so interesting on their own, but within this broader work felt, I'll be honest, shoehorned in and slightly condescending, because much of their content was explored or implied in the experience of the characters. Although I obviously had my issues, curiosity really propelled my reading forward, and it was worth it in the end. What an ending that was. Wow, and this is a book I would recommend. I think that the intersections of race and gender and class were handled so skillfully. I haven't read much Native American literature. I'd like to read more, but this wasn't entirely unfamiliar. There are certain systemic struggles shared by Indigenous peoples worldwide. The suffering racked by ongoing violent colonization is identifiable in its systematic nature, and I recognised in this a lot of what Indigenous communities in Australia face, as well as in the resilience and the resourcefulness, in the resistance and the creativity and community. I absolutely want to check out the sequel to this, Wandering Stars, which was recently released, and I'm pretty sure follows some of my favourite characters. So I'm excited to pick that up, hopefully some point this year, and see as well how his writing has progressed and improved, because he's certainly, yeah, one I want to keep an eye on. Then I read Sorcery and Small Magics, which is about two freaking wizards at freaking wizard school. Yeah, and the school is divided into those who write spells and those who cast spells, and we follow Leo, the protagonist, who is this like sarcastic charmer. He's kind of playboy energy. He writes a spell, it goes wrong, and in order to fix it, he must team up with his nemesis, the stoic, high-achieving Grimm. This was fun. The strongest part was absolutely the narrative voice. It was so fun and entertaining, and being in the mind of a lovable himbo like Leo was just a joy. Unfortunately, a book can only rely on witty narration for so long because what happened? It set up a solid enough world. I really enjoyed the setting of this wizard boarding school, Mogwarts or whatever it was called, and like okay side characters and a romance I was invested in, and then proceeded to do nothing with it. This felt like a 300-page introduction to this world. Ask me a single thing that happens in this book. He like ukulele'd his way out of getting eaten by a monster, I'm pretty sure, at one point. I was left unsatisfied in more ways than one. Listen, when I pick up an adult romantasy, it's for a reason. I'm feeling a certain type of way. And this was YA. It was well written YA, but it was YA. It was so tame. And I don't need like an explicit wizard orgy or massacre, but give me something. God, I'm a grown woman. Give me something. Something to up the stakes a little bit. I did read this in under 24 hours though, and I will be reading the sequel. So do with that what you will. That's everything I read in January. A pretty successful reading month for me personally, as was my month of watches. In January I saw the film everyone's talking about that explores power and expectation, the bodily, a woman's place in the world. A film that truly represented my feminine experience, a real girl's film. I am of course talking about Conclave. Not since Challenges has my seat been so wet from the nervous sweats because of the tension. No other reason. Conclave made me believe in good cinema again, and that sounds really dramatic, and it is, but last year after flop, The Substance, I just simply stopped going to the cinema because I couldn't take it, and now I'm back. We're so back, thanks to Conclave. What else did I see? Oh, Anora. I think Sean Baker is a good director. A writer, on the other hand, individual slices of fun and entertainment, it all added up to a cake made of shit. Kind of bullshit male fantasy of sex workers. I have an idea. Why don't we let sex workers tell their own story for once? Has anyone thought of that? Sean Baker is a freak and a weirdo, and he has moved up on my death note. That's all I have to say about that. Oh, A Real Pain. A Real Pain absolutely surprised me. I saw it on a whim. It follows Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, who play Jewish American cousins who go to Poland to sort of trace their roots where their grandmother was from. They go on this trip, this tour trip, which is full of other descendants of Holocaust survivors. And that sounds very heavy, and of course, it is, but there are such moments of humor and light, and of course it ends up being about the relationship between these two cousins and the relationship with their grandmother who has passed, and it was absolutely stunning. I had no idea of the premise going into this, but my own grandfather fled Poland, fled Warsaw, and could never bring it in himself to return, and so this obviously, hit close to home, but there's something about the exploration of this mythologizing of a place that was such suffering to your ancestors, suffering that almost feels incomprehensible, and this need for it to stay the same almost as evidence. That's obviously my interpretation, but when you go to these places, time marches on, technology marches on, and can you really find evidence and validation in a house that is bricks that someone different now lives in? And it's such an interesting question, and this is such a beautiful exploration of that and of intergenerational trauma, the effects of the Holocaust on descendants, on Jewish American descendants in particular, how to cope with the pressure of your family having survived this, of the almost the pressure of having a purpose, a reason for this to have happened. The performances are incredible. Kieran Culkin made me cry multiple times, and if you haven't seen this already, it's just absolutely fantastic. I love a round ending, an Ouroboros ending, and those final scenes are just so beautiful, so completely surprised me. Highly recommend. You want to talk about crying? Uptown Girls 2003, starring young Dakota Fanning and Brittany Murphy. It follows Brittany Murphy, who plays this kind of manic pixie dream girl. She is the daughter of a famous rock star, but he died when she was young. She was orphaned. Her mother died as well. Anyway, she's living her carefree life in NYC, sleeping with whoever she wants, partying with whoever she wants, buying whatever she wants. She has this little pet pig. It's awesome. When her accountant runs away with all her money, and she's got to get a job for the first time in her life. So she becomes a nanny to a precocious germaphobe of a little girl, and the little girl and the woman, or woman acting like a little girl and little girl acting like a woman, must get along, even though they don't. But they obviously have more in common and a lot to teach each other. Why am I about to cry? We were so hungover and my housemate and I bawled our eyes out to this film. I haven't cried that much in a movie in so long. This much care and love and heart is not being put into films about whimsical women anymore. No, why does everything look so flat? This had dimension, it had layers and textures, and was just so gorgeous. It is a quintessential early 2000s chick flick without all of the stuff that ages those films. There is no unnecessary romantic subplot. There's no internalized misogyny and catfighting. There isn't, you know, a questionable amount of racism. It's so heartfelt and it's so beautiful, and I think it's one of my favorite films of all time. The chemistry between Brittany Murphy and Dakota Fanning is electric, and everything about this is good. Every second is good. It perfectly understands what it feels like to be a girl, to be a woman, and to be making your way in the world that is so scary and unsure and unstable. And just watch it if you haven't. That teacup scene. The teacup scene. I have to be so honest with you all right now. All I listened to in January was the Conclave soundtrack and The Fame by Lady Gaga. If you haven't listened to, well, either of those albums, what are you doing? What are you doing with yourself? They're a perfect pairing as well, if I do say so. The Fame is, dare I say, one of the best pop albums of all time. What do I love? Oh, Summer Boy. That's what I couldn't stop listening to. That started the re-listen of the entire album. For days it was Summer Boy, just on repeat. And then Conclave. This is Prayer. I've been listening to that a lot, as well as, First Election. Huh? Pretty good. Can someone do the Fame Conclave album remix, please? And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you sooner rather than later. What have I got on for February? Who am I kidding? It's almost March. February's been and gone. So I'm going to try to get my Feb wrap up soon, and yeah. Okay. Love you. Bye.